I'm Kalilah Reynolds and welcome to Taking Stock. We're bringing you all the latest business news and telling you how it will affect you and your money. But before we get started, head over to takingstock-ja.com to subscribe to our newsletter. You can click the link in the description box below. And make sure you watch to the end because I have a giveaway coming up. Now come on, let's get this money.
First up, the Jamaica Labour Party JLP won the 2020 elections in a landslide victory last week, earning them another term in government. But with the COVID-19 pandemic still very much on, there's no time for a honeymoon. The administration must get straight back to work. Business leaders Keith Duncan of the PSOJ and Richard Pandohie of the JMEA discussed the new government's top priorities. And later, the analysts weigh in on the latest market developments. PanJam's shareholders have approved an additional public offer, but the company has decided it's still not the right time. And the Chinese electric car maker NIO is shaking up the market. We'll discuss.
But first, here's What's Hot, brought to you by Jamaica Money Market Brokers, your best interest at heart.
The country again faces tighter COVID-19 restrictions as the government recently declared that the country has entered into a new level of contagion, that of community transmission of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Community transmission means the virus can no longer be easily traced from one person to the other. The declaration was made last week following meetings with technical teams from the Health and Wellness Ministry and PAHO WHO. Among the measures being implemented to handle this phase of the virus are extended curfew hours, re-emphasis of work-from-home orders, and further restrictions on public gatherings. Some 15 first-time MPs are on their way to Gordon House following the Jamaica Labour Party's landslide victory at the polls on September 3. The JLP will now serve as government for a second consecutive term, with the Andrew Holness-led party winning over 40 seats. The results saw a number of PNP heavyweights being ousted from Parliament, including Peter Bunting, Wickham McNeil, Fenton Ferguson, Dayton Campbell, Ian Hales, and Horace Daly. In taking full responsibility for the crushing defeat, Dr. Peter Phillips resigned as president of the PNP and opposition leader the following day. However, he says he intends to carry out the duties of the office until a new leader is selected. Tesla plans to sell up to $5 billion worth of common shares. It made that announcement a day after its 5-for-1 stock split took effect last week. The electric car and solar panel maker says it intends to sell up to 10 million shares and use the proceeds for unspecified general corporate purposes. The stock would be sold through 10 different brokerage houses and each would get a 0.5% commission. Tesla shares closed the week at over $418. As of June 30, Tesla had $8.6 billion in cash and roughly $8.5 billion in debt, excluding vehicle and solar panel financing. Remittances to Jamaica are estimated to have grown by 14% for the June quarter, reflecting a recovery from the initial fallout caused by the pandemic based on Bank of Jamaica BOJ preliminary estimates. According to BOJ Governor Richard Pandohie, money transfers were up 42% for the month of June alone. The data is in line with the signs of resurgence that the market leader had detected prior to the close of the quarter. The bulk of the remittances are transacted via 6 remittance companies led by Western Union, operated by Grace Kennedy. JMMB Bank is offering a special financing package to workers on the COVID-19 frontline. The package offers these workers special rates on auto loans, home loans, and unsecured loans. The bank says that the move is part of its appreciation and support of frontline workers who have been at the center of the COVID-19 fight. It will cover essential workers, first responders, civil servants, and other public sector workers. Also those in the private sector within the fields of healthcare, manufacturing, information technology, education, and transportation. The Development Bank of Jamaica DBJ is providing financial support through its new Innovation Grant Fund to medium-sized companies. The bank wants to fuel the growth of innovative products and services by providing up to a $14 million grant for individual entities. The Innovation Grant Fund is the first of 6 being launched by the DBJ under its Boosting Innovation Growth and Entrepreneurship Ecosystems Biggie program.
What's Hot was brought to you by Jamaica Money Market Brokers, your best interest at heart. When we come back, Jamaica is now JLP country. We talk Andrew Holness's massive win and what it means for business in this COVID-19 era. This segment of Taking Stock is brought to you by
Bulwark Insurance Agent. Insurance made easy.
Welcome back to Taking Stock. With 49 out of 63 seats in the House of Representatives, the JLP now has a supermajority in the lower house. That's enough to make serious constitutional changes if they have the support of the Senate. And there's no time to linger. COVID-19 cases continue to rise, so Andrew Holness and his team must get right to work. So what's priority number one? I'm joined now by President of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, PSOJ, Keith Duncan, and President of the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association, JMEA, Richard Pandohie. Hi, Keith. Hi, Richard. Welcome.
Thank you, Kalilah.
Well, the election is finally over. We have a winner. The Jamaica Labour Party will be taking us through the next 5 years or so. And we're still in the middle of a pandemic. So it was a short campaign, which I thought was wise, but they have work to do immediately. And I invited you both on because I want to hear from Jamaica's business leaders. What are the priorities for the new administration? So let's start with you, Keith.
Well, Kalilah, as you said, I'm happy that the whole election period was kind of compressed, because we have seen election periods where there have been extended periods of campaigning. And while it was very tense, as we saw the number of cases grow, now we are expecting that now we're going to have to address some key areas. Firstly, it's the pandemic, because we have seen the exponential rise in cases. When we see the Prime Minister putting up his graph with how the cases will move, we're seeing like we're almost on or greater than a 2-week double in cases. And we know that our public health capacity is already extended. And we know that our public health personnel, doctors, nurses, national security, police, soldiers, we know that they're already exposed, so therefore we have reduced capacity, both at the level of the hospitals and at the level of personnel. So therefore, we have to get this in check. Now, what does that look like while we try to balance economic recovery with the management of the spread of the virus? So it is very important now that we get a clear indication of how this will be managed. Initially, and I don't know if I'm going on too long here, but in terms of priorities, but the first thing is then COVID, and how do we deal with it now? How do we get all the stakeholders to the table? We have our National Disaster Committee, which is all stakeholders to the table, which is chaired by the Prime Minister, which I think should be reconvened, and pull everybody to the table so that we're clear on the path. So moving away just from, press conferences, and which have been very transparent, but I think we need all stakeholders at the table, the expertise, so that we can have input, business, the public health experts, etc., being at the table to work out the solutions to move us forward, and that we're all engaged around it. Secondly, is on the economic side. We all, Richard and I, and many other stakeholders sat on the COVID Economic Recovery Task Force. There are priorities and recommendations that were made. How do we now move that forward? And thirdly is a crime consensus. We're able to achieve crime consensus, and
can't forget about the crime.
Exactly. We now need to leverage that social partnership mechanism to move us forward. So we're all at the table so that we're speaking with one voice around crime. And most importantly, the areas that need to be covered, socio-economic programs, along with the JCF reforms, continued reforms of the JCF, along with increase in investment in technology, capacity, infrastructure for national security, but a people-focused social intervention program, which is very important to go forward.
Richard, let's hear from you, because a lot has been said about the dollar and the role that exporting and manufacturing is going to play in this post-COVID environment. I see some pressure has been easing up on the dollar now with central bank interventions. What is the role of your sector in this new economy?
Well, first of all, I want to concur with a lot of what Keith said. I mean, he really summarized the priorities very well. And for me, I'm glad the election is over. For a number of reasons. I thought the election was always a big elephant in the room when it came to decision making in the last few months. And you're not so sure if the some of the decisions made were colored by the fact that the election was imminent. With that out of the way, I think more long-term strategic decisions can be made as opposed to just a short-term horizon
Right.
of election being done. So that's out of the room. The second thing is that the control of the pandemic is now. I think we will have continue to have exponential growth, as the Minister of Health and Wellness advised, and that becomes a big concern. With respect to the dollar and the economy, etc., during the debate, I watched the debates with keen interest, and I noted in the debate there was very little talk of the productive sector in a real way. In fact, in one debate, it talked about diversifying from tourism to community tourism. It was a little bit mind-boggling for me.
And I specifically asked the question about diversifying away from tourism because I thought the answer would have focused on exports, increasing the exports and shoring up the manufacturing sector, and I didn't hear that.
Manufacturing was mentioned in all the debates. The word manufacturing was mentioned 2 times, I believe.
Oh.
I mean, when they asked that question, I was like, okay, give me this question. I sat up, and then I went down very deflated. But anyway, the fact is that that we need to diversify the economic base. The productive sector needs to be a key pillar. And this is not about having a sector interest, about having a national interest. We now know that our tourism sector is going to take longer to recover than we all want to take. I mean, we know that. That's a reality. In the meantime, though, we have to keep the economy going, and we have to capitalize on the opportunities that have become available. We are focusing on the challenges that COVID has brought, but has also brought significant opportunities, Kalilah. In the export sector, in the agro-processing business, there are opportunities for import substitution. And I think that is where we have a big opportunity. Small and medium-sized businesses, huge opportunities for that. And I'm hoping that we'll get to the table rather quickly to look at some of the recommendations in the COVID recovery task force, and not just move from recommendation to implementation, but in an oversight manner. I believe that we need to have an oversight team ensuring that the agreed points are being executed in a timely manner. Otherwise, it becomes another nice document. So from the productive sector standpoint, a little bit, the manifestos had some good stuff, but they were, more or less some of them incomplete. And the JLP manifesto took quite a bit of stuff from the COVID recovery task force. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that those can be implemented. But my concern now is to move to execution very quickly. We believe the more challenging days with the pandemic are ahead of us, unfortunately, but we believe that's the case. And we need to hit the ground. I mean, the election is done, it's gone. The JLP has gotten an amazing mandate. I mean, beyond my own expectation. That mandate I think the people are saying, and the Jamaican people are so smart, we recognize the crisis we're in, and whoever was going to win had to get a mandate to kind of lead us through it.
Speaking of that very large mandate, a landslide victory for the JLP, do either of you have any concerns about the state of our democracy now because there is such imbalance in Parliament with so many on one side and so few on the opposition side? Keith, you first?
Okay, sure. I was heartened by the Prime Minister's victory speech, and he didn't call it a victory speech. He said the victor was Jamaica. But he was quite humble. He wasn't arrogant. I think he recognized the responsibility he has as Prime Minister for all of Jamaica, right? We have had majorities like this in the past, and I don't think democracy has suffered for it. I think the last one was like in 2003 when on the PJ Patterson we had a 52-8. We're at now 49-14, and so that I believe is workable. But I think our Jamaican people will have to ensure that we hold our Prime Minister and the government to account. We have to use our social partnership mechanisms, right, that are in place. Our National Partnership Council. We have to use, all of the available vehicles. The COVID Economic Recovery Task Force, as Richard was speaking to earlier, to drive the implementation of these key recommendations. And just to say that these recommendations came out of 1 month of work where we all sat down and focused our efforts around coming up with recommendations. And they were drafted into the manifesto of the JLP. Well, we're hoping now that we, as Richard said, that we can actually actualize and implement and prioritize, and that's where we need to get to the table in the same way where we have had EPOC since 2013, focus on macro fiscal. We now need to focus on the growth elements of our economy, And so I believe from a democracy perspective, I still think we're safe. I think the Prime Minister has acknowledged that he has a huge responsibility. He has embraced anti-corruption. I know with an increased majority now, I am hoping that he has the room to really deliver on this anti-corruption thing, to use the mechanisms, MOCA, to use FID, to use all of these, the Integrity Commission, and enable them, give them the capacity to get cases done and behind us.
Right.
Jamaican people need to see that people are paying the consequences, and it's not only a little man going to prison, going to jail because him thief Aki from the Governor General. That the big man them going to jail too. You understand what I'm saying? When them thief taxpayer money, right? When there's conflict of interest, how you deal with that? You know what I mean? Because we cannot have that stench of corruption hanging over us as a country, because all it does is break down society. So I'm hoping now that he only had a 1-seat majority when he won last time around, and therefore he had to play a political game almost to ensure.
Now there's a 3/4 majority in Parliament. So that gives them a hand to do quite a bit. It also, so that there are pros and cons, so it gives them the opportunity to make some changes that they may not have been able to make before if they get support in the Senate from the opposition. But Richard,
I just want to say something on democracy. I don't think it's at risk at all. I think it's I don't think so. I think in fact what heartens me is that our parliament, almost have 30% women in representation.
I'm very pleased to see that, definitely.
I think the higher number of women in our parliament, in our leadership, will actually improve governance that we'll have. When I saw the young women, how they performed last night, was very, I was heartened. That was, to me, a big win. And I think that is going to, we've seen a lot of the experienced, more mature, masculine-dominated seats being replaced by women. I think that augurs, from my own experience in private sector, the more women you have in your leadership, is actually the better the companies perform. And I expect the same thing to translate at the national level.
Is that true, Keith?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, my mother started JMEA just from my own personal history. And it's a different style of leadership, and I think I have some of that woman style leadership in me. But,
I've always admired the females in you, Keith.
No, I think it definitely brings a difference. Let's look at in Barbados, Mia,
yes.
and the New Zealand Prime Minister. Those are two examples.
Great example. As a matter of fact, I saw something recently where it was saying that countries that are led by women have dealt with COVID better, fewer cases, the spikes have been shorter, and so on.
I don't want to sound like Peter Phillips, but as a mother, you have there's a certain level of responsibility and compassion for your children. You know what I mean? So, you can't take reckless decisions because women know they have a responsibility. Men, unfortunately, are not as closely tied to that kind of responsibility. You know what I mean? And some men are, and some men take the responsibility. But unfortunately, as a society, we have had this kind of role kind of play. However, I believe, look at Mia Motley. She has a thing that any family that earns greater than 50,000 US, they're asking them to adopt another family that is vulnerable and at risk in dealing with COVID.
Interesting.
That goes straight to the heart. You know what I mean? So I do believe that when you look at the performance of some of these women in Parliament and in their constituencies, they work hard. And they understand the need on the ground and they deliver. If it's water, right? If it's road, if it's fixed up the roads, they are there delivering. You know what I mean? The man will go in there and probably drink some liquor and go and talk to the people and say, yes, man, we're going to do this and blah. But the women understand and they deliver.
Yeah.
And that's a good lesson for all our parliamentarians. People are tired of talk, deliver. And I believe when the Prime Minister strategically put the Ministry of Water and Construction and Infrastructure inside of his ministry, he knew exactly what he was doing, and he delivered. Why do you think Westmoreland moved? Because of that Mackenfield Road construction through Westmoreland. PNP has had that Westmoreland for decades, and what has happened? They did some work down there, and tangible work that people can see with their eyes and eat and drive on. And they say, you know what, I've been taken for granted for years. I don't want to sound political, right? But what I'm saying is that what has happened that they have delivered infrastructure in water in key areas, and that is what Jamaican people are maturing and say, I am tired of the platitudes and the words, deliver now. And you know, if you,
I hear that's what in central Manchester. I heard an interview with Rhoda Moy Crawford, who's defeated Peter Bunting, saying she's been putting in the work, giving people water and taking care of the areas that have been neglected by Mr. Bunting. So I see what you're saying there, Keith. But before we go,
Sorry, I just want to say a point, and another big outcome of the election last night is just that the concept of safe seats took a blow last night. I mean, it's many safe seats that none of us would have even thought twice about looking at the results went last night. And while there's a low voter turnout, etc., the fact is that it seems that the people of Jamaica, certainly the voting people, are asking for people to deliver on commitments, to be held accountable for what you say. I think that needs to translate to the private sector also. As private sector, I think our voices have become a lot more quiet, a lot more impactful, because we continue to not hold accountable our leaders to what needs to be done. And sometimes our specific interest overrides what we need to be looking at our national interest. I think this is an opportunity for real collaboration and partnership between the private sector and the government, because now the people of Jamaica we're standing at a very critical point in our history now, and we need everybody to come. The compassion, the national interest need to take priority above everything else. And we, in our role, while this opposition is rebuilding, and they will have to rebuild, and that will probably take some time. The rest of us, civil society, private sector, the churches, everybody needs to hold the government accountable for what they said they were going to deliver. We have given them a mandate based on what they said they were going to deliver. Let's hold them accountable to it.
Well, I'm sure that the two of you, among others, will be forefront in demanding that accountability over the next 5 years. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks for having us.
Kalilah. And great job last night, Kalilah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Up next, light bill maths continues this month. There are some things coming up in September that will affect your bill, so I'll explain. After that, I've got your market recap, and as usual, the analysts are standing by.
This segment of Taking Stock was brought to you by Bulwark Insurance Agency. Insurance made easy.
Hey guys, it's me, Teacher K, taking this short break from Taking Stock to do a quick recap of one of the most prominent line items from our light bills, Energy First and Energy Next. We broke down most of the components of our light bill in the last few weeks, so today I want to take the time to remind you of how Energy First and Energy Next work. So grab your monthly bill and let's get started. Now you'll notice in the slot that says current usage, there's something called Energy First and Energy Next. It's very important to understand how these numbers affect all the calculations, the fuel and IPP charge, foreign exchange adjustment, and GCT charges on your bill. So Energy First is the first 100 kilowatt hours that you use for the month, and Energy Next is everything after that. Energy First is a lot cheaper than Energy Next. Your first 100 kilowatt hours are billed at a rate of $9.66, while everything over that is billed at $22.49. This is to encourage you to use less electricity and also to make it cheaper for low-income people who don't use much. Now, to find out how your energy usage turns into dollar signs, just multiply the kilowatt hours that you used by the Energy First and Energy Next rates. Notice that the rate for Energy Next is more than double the rate for your first 100 kilowatt hours. So it's ideal to keep your usage below 100 kilowatt hours if possible. And I know that's easier said than done, especially with this heat. Now, to find out how the Energy First and Energy Next rates impact the other items on your light bill, take a look back at the other videos in the Light Bill Maths series. Teacher K's got you covered. Now back to taking stock.
Time now for your market recap, brought to you by Sagicor Investments. Think wealth, think Sagicor Investments. The Jamaica Stock Exchange advanced with the combined index gaining less than 1%. 98 stocks traded across both the main and junior markets of the JSE for the week ending Friday, September 4, 2020. 38 advanced, 51 declined, and 5 stayed the same. 68.8 million shares changed hands on the Jamaican dollar market, totaling over $450 million. Wigton Wind Farm ordinary shares traded the most, taking up nearly 28% of market volume. The stock lost 1 cent to open the week at 78 cents. Trans-Jamaican Highway traded the second highest, with people buying and selling 17 million shares in the company. Trans-Jamaican lost 2 cents to open the week at $1.26. And Mailpack Group rounded out the most traded, with 5.8 million units accounting for 8% of volume. The stock lost 13 cents to close last week at $2.13. Now let's see who had the biggest gains. Caribbean Cream jumped nearly 20% to close last week at $4.75. Siboney Group rose 18% to close last week at 13 cents. And Key Insurance rounded out the biggest gains to close the week at $8.57. On the losing side now, Express Catering fell 16% to close last week at $3.31. Dolphin Cove fell 15% to end last week at $5.51 a share. SSL Venture Capital Jamaica lost nearly 13%, down 75 cents. Market Recap was brought to you by Sagicor Investments. Think wealth, think Sagicor Investments.
This segment of Taking Stock, The Analysts, is brought to you by Ideal Portfolio Services. Welcome back to Taking Stock. I've got a team of analysts to examine the week in business. I'm joined by Wealth Advisor at Ideal Portfolio Services, Dwayne Taylor, and young investor at the University of the West Indies, David Rose. Hi, David. Hi, Dwayne.
Morning, Kalilah.
So tell me, what do you guys have your eyes on this week? Let's start with you, David.
Well, the PanJam AGM was earlier this week, and PanJam discussed some pretty critical things. And one of them was the rock hotel that should have been completed this year, which has now been pushed back to late Q3 2021. So, but I also don't know, the rock hotel is actually from an ocean hotel in downtown, which PanJam has basically redeveloped into a mixed property where you'll have apartments on the top floor, where the top 4 floors, and the lower half of the hotel will be a hotel basically. So it'll be 6 penthouses, 36 apartments, and low end is going to be a hotel under the Marriott's Tapestry collection. So it's going to be more a feature of Jamaican type of artists and works. And that is just the major real estate project they're working on right now. The Antigua Bay project that they were planning to work on, that's basically been shelved back. The deal we should have gone through came right at the start of COVID, so that Montego Bay project of the land that they're planning to develop into another hotel or property, mixed property, that's been pushed off. So the company said that the company got approval for the APO from shareholders, but unlike everybody else, including Barita, who was getting the approval and said they're going to go to market in order to actually get the capital now, PanJam said that the business conditions don't actually suit them right now. The environment isn't conducive for them to consider a APO right now.
So they're not doing their APO now? They've pushed that back?
So they've got the approval from shareholders, but the thing is, they said that the environment is not time for them to actually consider entering APO right now, and they want to raise $100 million US, which is around 15 billion Jamaican dollars. So you understand why they would want to actually try and just miss that target. And PanJam says they're trying to also reduce the dilution factor for shareholders.
They wouldn't be raising that entirely in Jamaica, would they?
That is just it. I asked Ms. Banks, who is the...
Because that's a lot of money. it would dwarf even TransJam.
You're right. And I actually asked Ms. Banks about that, and she said that right now they're fluid on options they might use, because I actually asked if they're going to consider cross-listing on the Jamaican Stock Exchange's US dollar market and raise some of their capital in US dollars. And they said they haven't decided as yet, because they got an approval now. They have pipeline ideas as to what they're going to do, but they didn't disclose as to what mechanism they would use. So right now, PanJam is basically chopping their dividend payouts. They haven't laid off any stock, but dividend payouts have been chopped for the last 2 quarters, and probably might be paid for the next coming quarter, seeing as the fact that their main income source, which they use to actually pay those dividends, Sagicor Jamaica, cannot necessarily pay them right now because of the BOJ's restrictions on dividend payments for 2020. Mm-hmm. And because I actually asked Ms. Banks, referring to even would PanJam consider using probably even more debt for their rock hotel project or their real estate projects, and they said that they're about to raise debt this year to cover the rock hotel and other real estate projects they are planning on doing, and that they might consider the option of using probably preference shares or another means of financing.
I find that companies are getting more and more aggressive with the amount of money they're coming to the market to raise. Is it a case of, let me just see how much I can get because everything so far has been subscribed and many oversubscribed? Let me see how high the market is willing to go. Dwayne, let me hear some thoughts from Dwayne on that.
I mean, in terms of that, I think companies are just trying to put themselves in a position where they're a bit more liquid. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty because of the pandemic. So these ventures or these initiatives to raise capital to increase their, I guess, liquid position, so to speak, is really just them almost safeguarding themselves, in the event that, there is some downturn, they have some obligations to meet and they need some cash to take care of same. So, I mean, I saw the PanJam possibility of an IPO, and that's what came to mind immediately. And even things outside of Jamaica on the US market, with Tesla looking to raise more money as well, that was another indicator that, companies are looking to be in a liquid position, whether they have some initiative in place or they're just safeguarding in the event that there is some significant downturn.
Well, as you mentioned the U.S. market, Dwayne, it wasn't such a good week on the U.S. market last week. There was a massive sell-off. David, what was behind that?
Well, as someone indicated, it's really just profit-taking to basically call it that, because you decided Tesla and Apple split. You had a massive fall-off at the start of the week, in the intraday trading, a slight recovery, and then end of the week, had this massive sell-off. And persons are saying, the case where person is profit-taking because you remember all losses have basically been erased for 2020 for the overall index. Most stocks are still down in the S&P 500, but on a serious basis, so the big stocks like Apple, Microsoft, and others, they're still up, and they're still driving the overall market. So it wasn't such a surprise that we're taking profit right now, seeing as there is still uncertainty with the next round of stimulus by the federal government, which should be critical to preserving some jobs. And on top of that, you still have certain levels of data coming out, which is basically pointing to certain negative economic futures that are coming within the next probably 2 quarters. Because right now, we're basically, as I would say, averted a certain level of damage or economic crisis in terms of the fiscal stimulus by different governments. But the reality is that there is still a high level of unemployment claims coming in the US alone, 1 million plus a week still, even from March to now. So that's still showing that you're having certain levels of economic fears and discord at the moment. With respect to Tesla, they're trying to raise $5 billion, but they just missed their biggest, as I would say, advantage, actually making that sale much more facilitative.
What advantage was that?
So the inclusion into S&P 500. So that's the largest 500 companies in the overall market. And once you're added into that index, you're basically considered, what I would call a staple stock that would probably be added to like a pension fund or a unit trust or mutual fund. So it's basically like, I shouldn't say a symbol, but a form of recognition as to the company's size and capability. So 3 stocks were actually added yesterday: Etsy, Teradyne, Kalilah, but Tesla was not added in that rebalancing of the overall index. So ExxonMobil, which is actually in Guyana, was kicked out recently of the S&P 500, but Tesla wasn't added because the thing with our inclusion S&P 500 that is done by a committee. Similar to the JSE's listing committee, you have a committee that actually meets and Tesla met the criteria for profitable quarters, and their market capitalization was actually sizable for inclusion, but the committee did not include them based on potentially some other factors that they are considering for future consideration of Tesla. So that's a big hit because in after hours trading, the stock was on 7%, just because of that big miss of not being included in S&P 500.
Well, that doesn't mean that they won't make it at some time in the future. How often does the S&P do that rebalancing?
I'm not sure specifically of how frequently they do it, but they've done rebalance within the last 2 months. And I'm referring to ExxonMobil, and I think Shopify was added as well. But the thing about what the problem is that is the fact that they declined them now, because the Tesla says they're coming in for $5 billion US, and all these big players are coming for several large sizable amounts of capital. So in the US, you have several SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies, which are raising billions upon billions by other companies. So for Tesla to have this, as I would say, miss, it's basically going to be a bad sign for some investors to say that why weren't they included? Because that's basically your golden ticket to getting easier facilitation of capital for your future plans, because Tesla is having battery day in a couple of weeks and they're still going with the other initiatives. So this is a miss for analysts and investors for the company's inclusion.
David, when do you have time to study chemistry?
Honestly, I don't know what's going on in my life. Articles, chemistry, reading. You have to learn.
You would think this is full time for you. I don't say, why do you have time to do chemistry? But Dwayne, we've been talking a lot about Tesla. You've been eyeing another electric car maker on the US market. That's NIO. Tell me about that.
Right. So NIO was touted the Tesla of China, essentially. They started in 2014 and they opted to list in September of 2018. Now, since then, there has been a bit of growth, but the most notable growth was seen this year, where their actual year-to-date performance is 365% on their stock price in terms of return on the stock price. So they are a growing company.
Did you say 365%?
Right, yes,
This year. Wow.
This year alone. So the thing about them is that obviously China has a huge market, and as they're manufacturing these electric vehicles, persons are gravitating to the model. Now, Tesla is based in China, but they're getting some competition from NIO. So most recently, I want to say between July and August, they found that there is an increase in the demand for their vehicles. So revenue has been picking up for them, and they've been building some traction. So it's definitely one that we're looking at, especially when investors are looking for alternatives, for the US. They want to delve into other markets. So NIO is a stock that presents an opportunity for investors to jump into another electric car manufacturer. All right.
Which market is NIO listed on?
It's on the New York Stock Exchange. It's listed in the New York Stock Exchange, but it's just one of those companies that's based outside of the US. So they would have to pay their fee to be a part of that stock exchange.
I see. And you can buy into NIO through Ideal Portfolio Services?
You can buy through us.
Mm-hmm. David, what else are you looking at right now?
Well, some of the results came out earlier this week. You had Signals, CPJ, Awisinko, and Fontana. So CPJ results didn't surprise me. But the fact that tourism was basically closed down, then the Awisinko results were pretty good, considering that the fact that their styrofoam business had to basically close off at the start of the year. So
but they're M&D, manufacturing and distribution, which has been COVID resilient for the most part.
Yeah.
You're right. And it was just pretty impressive, the fact that even with the school closures, no entertainment, tourism slowed down, they were still able to pull off just in level of profitability in spite of COVID. And with respect to even the fact that Usinko said that, well, Mr. Mahfoud basically pointed out that they basically had to shift and on their lower margin products, because the high margin products, probably water, has been selling in higher quantities. So they've been shifting to more lower margin products to make up for that deficit. And then you had Cygnus, who basically had a slight dip in profit, but a solid continued third year in terms of growth. So they have their first quote-unquote non-performing loan, because a mining company which couldn't operate because of the restrictions and movement. But for Cygnus, that wasn't anything significant, because when they did the valuations, there was no necessarily expected credit loss that hit their income statement because of the fact that they value discounted value of the asset that they actually have versus the investment they have was greater. So it actually works out for them. And remember, Cygnus themselves wants to do an APO, and they're having their meeting at the end of this month, and they want to come for $20 million US. And that was based on what we knew at the time back in March. They might have changed their prospects, or they might want to seek more capital now, but I expect Cygnus to actually get that full capital participation, and even has to oversubscribe. They declared dividend yesterday of 0.00249 US cents, which is pretty 0.00249 US dollars, which is pretty good considering the fact that they paid out a similar amount back in February. So even with COVID and the fact that some companies are restricted because of the BOJ's actions, Cygnus as a St. Lucian IBC can still pay out to shareholders and still deliver those returns that persons want, in terms of knowing that the company can deliver capital returns in this COVID environment.
All right. Well, you've both given us a lot to chew on this week. Thanks for joining us, David and Dwayne. All the best.
All right.
Thanks again, Kalilah.
Bye.
Amen.
This segment of Taking Stock, The Analysts, was brought to you by Ideal Portfolio Services. That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share with a friend. Also subscribe to our newsletter at takingstock-ja.com and turn on those post notifications so that you can be the first to see all my other features. We want to help people learn more about money so we can all get this money together. Now this week on Money Mondays JA, Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances recently announced a stock split, and the share price has jumped. We'll take a closer look. And on Money Moves JA with Exim Bank, I'm talking to the tax man. Tax Administration Jamaica TAJ is in the house to explain how to file your taxes, especially if you have a small business. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Kalilah Ray, and follow at Taking Stock JA on Instagram. If you want to connect with the analysts this week, check the description box below for their contact information. Now, congratulations to last week's winner, Audie Cargill. You've won one of our exclusive Let's Get This Money t-shirts. Email orders at KalilahRayMedia.com to claim your prize. Time now for this week's giveaway question. So last week on Taking Stock, what was Dashan's concern about the PNP's rent-to-own housing plan? Answer in the comments below. You have until Friday, September 11 to post your answer. Now tell a friend about Taking Stock. Investing is the new sexy, so let's make it cool to talk about money. I'm Kalilah Reynolds. Stay safe.